So I'm somebody who heavily enjoys indie games, more so than AAA games the last couple of years. And while sometimes my list varies of what games I recommend to what people, I'd like to just talk about what my top favorite 10 indie games of all time are, or at least as of right now. And my number one is probably going to be a little surprising to some of you because it's maybe an unorthodox game. Before we get into the list, be sure to like and subscribe and let me know down below what your favorite indie games are. At number 10, I have a very new game, but a game that has got me really obsessed every time I play it, and that is Balatro. For such a new game to make my top 10 list was kind of weird to me to even consider it, but the more I play it, the more I fall in love with it. I'm not ready to even put it down yet, and I can see this eventually maybe even climbing higher up on my list. This really unique idea of having a roguelite card builder deck, but that has to do with poker where you're just trying to beat the big blinds or the money that you're trying to reach is such a odd concept that maybe shouldn't work on paper, but it really does in execution, and you should really check it out if you haven't. Number 9 is One Step from Eden. Being a big fan of the Mega Man Battle Network games myself, there's no surprise that I enjoy this game. This game is really fast paced, I love the artwork, and even though I haven't played it as much as some of these other games, I think that the game is super fun, and it has such a challenging edge to it. Number 8 is Undertale. Undertale was one of the first indie games on the Switch that really captivated me and got me more into indie games, so I have to give it credit where it's due. And where Undertale excels the most is the writing of the story. While the story may not be anything mind-blowing, it's the writing and the characters that has such a charm to it. And not just that, but the combat is so unique and weird that it just makes you want to keep playing and seeing what else is going to come out at you. And the fact that this game was made by one person is absolutely mind-blowing. Number 7 is Celeste. I've talked about Celeste a couple of times. It's one of those really challenging platformers that you can't put down because you want to beat it. And on top of that, it has beautiful pixel art, and the story is so much deeper than you originally think it's going to be. And if you haven't already checked it out by now, you really should. Just be ready to rage a little bit. Number 6 is Neon White. Neon White caught me by surprise as well because on premise I didn't really think it was going to be that interesting, but the more I played it, the more I got hooked. There isn't very many first-person platformers that I enjoy, and this one kind of incorporates a little bit of card game, not really, but there's some cards in it, and it has like a shooter aspect to it, but you also have to platform perfectly so in order to beat the level properly, and it's such a cool concept, and the storyline is okay, it's nothing mind-blowing, but the gameplay more than makes up for it. Number 5 is Hades. There isn't much more I can say about Hades that hasn't already been said. It's one of the more popular indie games of all time, and for a good reason. It has so much replayability, the story is cool, entertaining, but the gameplay and the combat is so engaging and so smooth. And again, if you haven't played this one, I really recommend you do. Number 4 is another big indie game, Cuphead. While this is probably considered one of those indie games that's kind of a little bit closer to AAA status, the game is such a cool concept. The hand-drawn art, the music, the world, the environment is so cool, and it makes you nostalgic for a time that you probably weren't even alive in yet. The boss battles are very colorful and really stick with you. I still remember how insanely hard it was to beat that dragon, and especially if you play with a friend, you'll for sure make memories that you'll always look back on because of how difficult this game can be, but how fun it is as well. My number 3 favorite indie game is Slay the Spire. I'm a sucker for card games, and I believe this game to be the best card-themed roguelite out there. Building your deck the right way is so rewarding when you get to go far, but then you also have the aspect of possibly just getting unlucky and not having access to great cards. And still trying to make it through is so fun. It's such a challenging game as well, and it has so much replayability to it. There's so many modifications you can do to make the runs unique. All in all, an amazing game that should not be slept on. Number 2 is the game that probably has the simplest gameplay mechanic, and that's Vampire Survivors. You really don't do anything, you're just moving the analog stick around and choosing a power up here and there. Sometimes simplistic is better, and in this case, that's 100% the truth. The fact that there's so many different characters, lots of levels to choose from, and the gameplay sometimes feels different, and even when it doesn't, it's still just satisfying to build up your powers and just watch yourself just absolutely annihilate the whole enemies on the map. One of my favorite things to do even to this day is sometimes just listen to music while I'm playing this. If I want to listen to a new album but I don't want to just sit there listening to the music. I'll sometimes just play Vampire Survivors while I'm listening, and it's such an amazing time. Sometimes it enhances that experience. Highly, highly recommend it. And before I get to my number one game, again, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what other indie games you enjoy, because it might be a game that I haven't tried and I might really want to try it out, and hopefully it'll crack my top 10. So for number one, I have Dicey Dungeons. It's such a weird game, especially to have on my number one spot on a list like this, because there's so many indie games to choose from. But I really feel like Dicey Dungeon is such an underrated game. There's a level of challenge to it. There's a lot of different game mechanics within the game itself, but I also just love the RNG factor of it. I like that sometimes luck really just will screw me over. I like that sometimes it's on my side. And while yes, there is a level of strategy to it, there isn't as much, but that's a big part of the charm and kind of part of the storyline. And not to mention, the art isn't going to be for everybody, but I find it really charming. And I think that Dicey Dungeons is kind of what indie games are about. It's about doing something a little different. And in this case, it's different enough to where it stands out on its own, but it's also similar enough to other games like this, other roguelites, where it feels familiar. And for me personally, it checks most of the boxes, or all of the boxes that I look for in video games. And I hope that maybe you give it a chance, because it's usually really cheap on sale. Usually it's about $5. So give it a try if you haven't. And once again, thank you guys for watching these videos, and I'll see you next time.